Have you ever faced a moment in life where it seemed like everything was falling apart? Like it was just blow after blow and you didn't know if you'd ever get up. But then when you look back on it, you realize it was setting the stage for your greatest achievements yet. Today's guest is a testament to the power of resilience, hope, and transformation. You'll hear her story of navigating the hurdles of academic aspirations, facing personal setbacks, embarking on a deeply personal journey of loss and discovery, and in the end, finding herself. Her story is a beacon of light for anyone feeling lost in the shadows of life's challenges on how to rise up and really become who you're meant to be. Welcome to Unleash Your Inner Creative with Lauren LaGrasso. I'm Lauren LaGrasso. I'm a multi-Webby award-winning podcast host and producer, singer-songwriter, and multi-passionate creative. This show sits at the intersection of creativity, mental health, self-development, and spirituality, and it is meant to give you tools to love, trust, and know yourself enough to claim your right to creativity and pursue whatever it is that's on your heart. And before we get into it, I do want to let you know that my podcasting course, Podcasting for Self-Expression, is available now. It is a course to help you launch your dream podcast and find your authentic voice. It's a 12-week course that has live coaching integrated into it. It would be my honor to guide you through to help you create your own podcast. Early bird pricing is available now. I've extended it through Memorial Day, so that is Monday, May 27th. For $200 off, use code EARLYBIRD. That's code EARLYBIRD. And there are payment plans as low as $99 a month through Affirm and Afterpay. So check it out at laurenlagrasso.com. It will also be at the show notes, and use code EARLYBIRD for $200 off. All right, now to the guest. Today's guest is Ashley Menzies Babatunde. She's a lawyer, storyteller, founder, and diversity, equity, and belonging strategist. She's passionate about working at the intersection of humanity and career. She's the host, creator, and producer of No Straight Path, which is a podcast aimed at exploring the human stories behind success. As an LA native with Black American and Guyanese roots, Ashley believes in the power of storytelling because it allows people to connect with one another, inspire each other, and build deep empathy. Ashley's story is remarkable and symbolizes how transitioning through setbacks can be a way to pursue your truest passions. I always say your failures can become your greatest expanders, and her story is certainly an example of that. She shares her evolution from facing challenges in her law career to embracing storytelling and DEI work. Ashley showcases resilience, self-discovery, and the power of embracing creativity and vulnerability through life's challenges toward finding one's true calling. From today's chat, you'll learn how to recover and rediscover yourself after disappointment or perceived failure, how to embrace and go after your truest passions, how to pivot your career and make your own path, the healing power of storytelling and vulnerability, and much more. Okay, now here she is, Ashley Menzies Babatunde. Ashley, thank you so much for being here on Unleash Your Inner Creative. You have so much to teach us about how who we are is the best thing about us. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Lauren. I'm excited. Love your podcast, love your energy. I feel like we'd be friends. So this is exciting for me too.
Yeah, I feel like that too. And I love this story of when you were a little girl. I think you were 10 years old. You wrote a letter to yourself about your law dreams. Can you take me through that?
Yeah, little Ashley was very ambitious and she knew what she wanted from an early age. And I love to write letters. I still write them today, which is fascinating because I know it's definitely an art that people don't really do much of anymore. And I was writing down my goals, and I think this might have been a school assignment. And so I wrote down that I wanted to be a lawyer, that I wanted to go to Stanford, that I wanted to go to Harvard or USC. Other things about my personality, that I liked soccer and pasta and watching TV and shopping, which is, they're all true still. But in that letter, a lot of those dreams came true later on in life. I ultimately did become a lawyer, and I did go to Harvard for law school, and I did go to Stanford for undergrad. And so I was really set and focused on those goals at an early age and really worked hard to attain them.
Yeah, I mean, you did it all. And then this big thing happens, and it might have been like the first time in your life that something like this happened, where you failed the bar twice and then ended up losing your job that you had at the time. And this is something you talk about so much. I know it's been kind of like the fire of a lot of your creativity, actually. But take me through that moment. How did you feel and react in the immediate aftermath of this happening?
Yeah, so definitely the first feeling was just shock, disappointment, sadness. It was really, really tough because I had thought for so much of my life that it would just continue to go down this really linear path because I had achieved everything that I set out to do. And not that it was really easy. I'll admit that there were challenging times, but if I put in the hard work, I usually saw positive results. And this was the first time, I worked hard.
Yeah.
I just thought, okay, if you work hard, you're going to get the results you want. And I think that's true. It's just might not be in your timing. And a lot of my life up until that point had worked in my timing. And so at that point, I had achieved all those goals on that in that letter, except the lawyer one. So this was the one, the bar exam was standing in the way of that. So I felt like I was on the cusp of my dreams, but I couldn't achieve it. And so it was devastating. And especially because, I'd been working towards this for so long. I always wanted to be a lawyer. And so this was the last barrier. And so I felt a lot of shame. I felt, especially as a Black woman in these spaces, you certainly want to make sure that you are overperforming and that no one is doubting you. And you have to kind of work your way up to make sure that you're not doubting yourself. So when you finally get over all that imposter syndrome and kind of feel that self-esteem and that self-worth, and then something like this happens, I was just crushed, to say the least. And I figured out a lot about myself, but those initial feelings were equating who I was with the outcome, thinking I was a failure at the time.
Yeah. And it was so heartbreaking. I listened to you on a podcast. I totally relate, by the way. This has been my biggest lesson in life is divesting my worth from my output and what I do. I probably will be learning it forever. But there was this part that like really shattered my heart when you were talking about how you thought that your boyfriend at the time, your now husband, was going to leave you when this happened.
I know, and it sounds so crazy when I say it now, especially because I'm so, far removed from that and have been able to just, you mature and define yourself by so many different things now. But at the time, I really thought that. And it was a really good mirror for me when it comes to helping me understand what I really valued and what I thought about myself and how I valued myself. I've always been a confident person, but why am I confident? I'm confident because I've achieved everything I wanted to achieve, right? And so I had to work on figuring out how can I understand, because I know I am, but really feel that I am worthy of all the blessings, of all the success, and of the love of my boyfriend and now husband at the time. And he thought that was, wild, but that was something I was thinking.
I totally get that. How did you start to do that? What were like the piece by piece things you did to start to say, okay, maybe it's an inside job?
Definitely time. I think that it is a journey. I think having conversations with lots of different people was extremely helpful. I think storytelling. And so knowing that I wasn't alone, I think probably actually the most important and most helpful thing during that time was talking to people who had achieved what I wanted to achieve and had gone through the same thing. And during that time, vulnerability was not popular. People were not sharing, on TikTok. TikTok did not exist, their actual like life stories and things of that nature and the hard parts. At that time, it was still about this projection of perfection.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was hard. And so when I started to have these smaller kind of conversations on the side with different friends who had also gone to these elite institutions and had failed and were fine, and professors and people I looked up to, and Michelle Obama wrote about it in her book, and Kamala Harris did. Kamala Harris is the vice president of the United States now and was an amazing U.S. attorney and things of that nature. It's like, okay, wait, this is a part of life. And perhaps I have lived in a kind of privileged way where, this needed to happen.
Mm.
I think the conversations that I started to have made me realize, okay, I'm human. This is normal. I can get back up. I can do it. And I think it's also exacerbated in these kind of high pressure places. So when I was taking the exam for the third time, I remember I met a young woman. She was so sweet. She had extra pencils for me.
Aw.
And she was like, oh, yeah, this is my third time. And she went to, maybe not the top law school. And she's like, oh, it's the California bar. People take it again. It's fine. And her just nonchalant attitude, she was like, she knew she was going to pass it. It was just so beautiful. And I was like, how can I become like her? Like, why am I just, it's not the end of the world. So it's also adopting like a different attitude and realizing, the big scheme of things, people fail and it's fine.
Yeah. There's so much to break down from what you just said. I mean, the first thing I'm thinking about is you did pass the third time. So how did you not psych yourself out and like stay calm and believe in yourself through that after having, I would say it's a trauma around the first two experiences?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the second time I did psych myself out, and
Mm.
that was the problem because the second time my job was on the line. And so there was so much more on the line there. And so much pressure. And by the third time, it's like, okay, I already lost my job. Like, let's just give this a try. I know the material. I've studied for quite some time. I got to study this time with my husband, who was a year below me in law school. So it was his time to finally take the exam. So he was a very calming presence and super encouraging. And I kind of just let go of expectations. And
Mm.
then that's when things happened. And I also had just talked to people who had never passed the exam and they were fine. And they were able to use their law degree and be extremely successful and happy and doing fulfilling work. So it also gave me time during that time off of studying and talking to different people, realizing that there's other paths. Deep down, I wanted to be a lawyer and I was pretty sure I was going to be able to do it, but I had to let it go a little bit. Like, when you hold on to a dream so tight, it's sometimes harder to achieve. It's sometimes easier to kind of loosen that grip and relax a little bit and let go of expectations, and then you start to realize them.
That's what I'm constantly battling with is like, how can you remain a driven person, a person with big dreams, while still being open to possibility and knowing that who you are is the best thing about you? Like, how do all these things come together? Because I do believe they can all exist. But so often, I think, especially, I heard you talk about how millennials were built more for this like perfectionism, high achieving, we are what we do mentality. It's hard to not let that one take the lead.
Yeah.
So, how much of this do you think is who somebody naturally is versus the stew we've been raised in?
Yeah. So the nature versus nurture conversation. So there's definitely nature for the millennials coming up in our generation. I think our parents wanted us to be successful. They wanted us to survive in this capitalist, system. And so I think, there are a lot of high expectations for many of us. And just the images and the idea of success was often tied to, monetary value and tied to certain skill sets and things of that nature. The culture is thankfully changing. And so that's very nice. And we're talking about different things about, self-worth and value outside of what we produce. And so there's been this new wave, but we were steeply raised in that culture. So I think it affects everyone to a certain extent, but a lot of this is personality driven. I don't think I told this story, but when I was 4 or 5 years old, I colored outside of the lines and had a complete meltdown, breakdown. And my cousin went to the next activity unbothered. Would just color outside the lines. And we're literally the same. Like, she's a creative, she's in marketing, she does well, but it's very easy for her to disassociate who she is from work. She's very much into her family life and into home decor. And you can have a whole conversation with her and you'll never know what she does. That was like how she was born. She was just chill and didn't care. And I was so intense. I cared about every dance routine, getting it right. I would like boss my cousins around. I was like a drill sergeant. Like, like I was just born, and so I've had to learn how to be a little bit better. Well, she had to kind of get a little bit pushed maybe to do well in certain institutions to kind of succeed in these environments. And so I think a lot of it too is personality.
Yeah. So you take the bar the third time and you pass it. And then how do you go from there to then getting your first big lawyering job?
Yeah. So fortunately, after that, it wasn't that challenging, thankfully. So I did my first big lawyer job. I did that for 9 months because they do allow you to kind of not practice, but you're a law clerk and not an associate. And so I did have that experience of being in big law and then didn't pass the exam. And so that's when I got let go. So I went to basically a very similar firm.
Mm.
But this time in Los Angeles, I was in the Bay Area before. And I just came back home. My husband was coming to LA as well. And so it worked out. And I was applying during off season. So people did say, a lot of people said, I don't know if you're going to be able to get back into big law. It's going to be really challenging. Like there were definitely, I was not applying at a time where it was going to be relatively easy for me. And I also had to deal with failing the exam and explaining that in my interviews. And so I sent out my resume to like every firm in Los Angeles. I worked with different contacts and got a few interviews and ultimately got an interview at a firm that I just really wanted to work at and loved and stayed for, a number of years and have built great relationships and learned a lot. And so I'm grateful for that experience as well.
I'm curious, did some people actually like that you failed twice and then kept going and like succeeded? Did some people say, wow, that shows a lot of tenacity and we want to work with someone like that? Hi, creative. Are you yearning to share your story, expertise, and heart with the world? Well, I have some exciting news for you. I am launching a podcasting course. It's called Podcasting for Self-Expression. It is a course and mastermind with live coaching to help you find your authentic voice and launch your dream podcast. And in the course, I'm going to be using the same techniques I've employed to coach and produce dozens of hit podcasts like We Can Do Hard Things with Glennon Doyle, Unlocking Us with Brene Brown, Lauren Conrad Asking for a Friend, and this sweet show you're listening to right now, Unleash Your Inner Creative. During the course, I'll take you through everything you need to know to create a compelling show, from how to use your life story to find the topic you're meant to speak on, to the important technical aspects, to innovative ways to market your show, and more. I'm so excited to offer this because it really is different than anything else that's available on the market because it looks at podcasting not only from a tactical standpoint, but also through the lens of self-development because that's what makes a compelling show. Somebody who really knows who they are, who they want to connect with, and what their authentic voice sounds like. If you're interested, you can find all the information on the show notes and at my website, laurenlagrasso.com. Just click the word course. I also want to let you know there are payment plans as low as $99 a month. That was really important to me. You can do that through Affirm and Afterpay. Check it out. I would be honored to have you in. And great news, I'm extending the early bird to Memorial Day. So we're continuing on with a little Memorial Day sale. So if you use the code earlybird by Monday, May 27th, that's Memorial Day at 12 a.m. Pacific, you can get $200 off. Plus, you'll also get a free one-on-one coaching session with me for being an early bird participant in the course. I would be honored to have you. So check out my website, go to laurenlagrasso.com, click on course, and type in the word early bird at checkout to get $200 off and a free one-on-one coaching session with me. Can't wait to be in community with you even more and to help you bring your authentic voice into the world.
Yes. Yeah, they did. And I wrote a blog post about failing the exam. And one of the interviewers actually read that. And she said, like, I love the grit and resilience that you demonstrated, which was really nice. And I had another interviewer in another firm say the opposite. Like, we need you to be able to handle stress. It was not a good interview. And I didn't end up going to that firm.
Yeah. They don't sound like they would have been for you.
No.
I don't want to work with someone like that.
Exactly. But that was like the fear I had because that's kind of the culture of the legal profession. It's getting better. They're talking more about how the bar exam's not a big deal and not like it's not a reflection of your worth. And I coach people through it now all the time and they pass it and it's fine. And like they have less anxiety than I did because we're normalizing it. But at the time it was still like, perhaps they're going to judge you.
There's only one per year, right?
You can take it twice.
Twice per year. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's still so few times for something that really stands between you and what you want to do. That's wild. What do you love about law? Because when I think about being a lawyer, it just sounds devastating, to be honest with you. It sounds so difficult. None of my friends who have ever gone through law school have been like, this is great. It sounds so, so hard. And then a lot of times you get in these law firms and it's kind of thankless work. What do you love about it? Like, what is the beauty in law that draws you to it?
So that's a great question. I did transition out, but
You did? Okay, wait.
yeah,
I
so we
didn't know
can talk
that.
about it.
Okay, tell me.
Yeah, I'll tell you a few things. So because I feel like my husband's could answer this question a lot better, and that helped me figure out perhaps it's not the right place for me. But I loved being able to use the law as a vehicle for change to help people. I mean, that's the best thing. And you see the movies and you get glimpses and parts of it, especially in your pro bono work. Like I was able to help people stay in their homes through eviction notices. I did it in law school. I did it after. I was able to help folks with their DACA application. So the dreamers and undocumented folks in LA, and I did a lot of those clinics. Small claims court, love doing small claims court, helping people just, figure out disputes and not have to go and spend a lot of money on litigation and help them with perhaps it was like a property dispute or something like kind of like common everyday problems, helping people. I love that. Like that is why I went to law school. I think the challenge is if you don't come from money, you go to law school, you get a lot of big loans. Going to law school and becoming a lawyer kind of helps you change socioeconomic status usually and help your family and live a certain life. And doing that work in the public interest space is hard because it doesn't pay you.
Mm-hmm.
In the bigger law firms, you're going to do some of that work, but most of it is going to be for corporate clients. So the parts of the law that I loved were all things that don't really make a lot of money. Number one. And the other part of it that I enjoyed was white collar investigations, and that ended up being my practice. And so what was really cool about that is that if there's a particular issue that a company is having, and maybe it be like a harassment issue, a fraud issue, we don't know, it's a potential issue. A whistleblower complaint comes from somebody at the company. They reach out to a firm and say, can you investigate this issue? And part of the reason I wanted to be a lawyer growing up is I would watch Diagnosis Murder with my grandmother. I would read Nancy Drew. I wanted to be a little detective. And that's what I ultimately got to do. I got to go through all of this different facts of the case, look at the paperwork, do witness interviews, talk to different people at the company, try to figure out what's going on, then apply all the facts to the legal framework, and then provide a recommendation to the company about what they can do to be compliant with the law, what they can do to make whatever issue they're having. And in addition to that, you're also the liaison that is advocating for the company if the government is involved. And that can be just kind of cool, exciting work as well. So I found work I liked, but I think what I loved was all the pro bono public interest work.
Can I tell you, I'm so happy to hear this because when I was listening to you do interviews on the other podcasts I listened to, I'm like, she's not supposed to do law. I was like, it felt very strongly. I just knew at some point you're going to do something different because I could hear it in your voice. I've heard in your voice something that I've heard in my own voice many times where it's like, there's something else that's pulling her. I want to get into it because you went through this, you were building up at this law firm. And I know at the time when the bar happened, you thought it was the worst thing that happened to you, but then you actually went through like real life tragedy when you lost your mom.
Yes.
Can you just talk me through a little bit of that? Because that is so difficult. You're young. Sounds like you and your mom were very, very close, and she was really just so supportive in your life. Can you talk through losing your mom and advice for people who are also going through that kind of grief?
Yeah, definitely. I don't even know where to start. That was real tragedy, like you said. That was unexpected. My mom passed away from stage 4 leiomyosarcoma, which is a really rare cancer. We don't really have cancer in our family. So it was just something that kind of, came out of the blue for us. And I just remember doing everything that I could to support her at that time. And that was helpful. I felt like, and it's, I guess, related to the creative work and kind of my story in general, but it was 2020. So we're also dealing with the pandemic. We're dealing with my mom's cancer. There's restrictions too on chemo. So it's a whole host of things. And I also told my parents, because I'm an only child.
Me too.
Oh, yeah. So, and so they try to protect you. And I remember a couple years before this happened, I said, hey, if you guys are ever having financial problems, if you are having health problems, any kind of issues, legal issues, tell me. I'm in a position where I can help because my dad had lost his job a couple of years before that and I was able to help financially. So but they weren't going to let me in. They were just going to suffer without me.
Yeah.
And so I was so grateful because the way my mother moved through the world, she wouldn't have told me. And so she told me, and it was the greatest gift because I got to be with her. I told my teams at some point, can I do no weekends or no meeting Fridays? I spent those Fridays with my mother. I spent, most nights with her. And she was extremely positive, super faith-based Christian woman. Like, I admire it so much. And during that time, I also had to think about, okay, how are we going to get through this? I need some creative outlet to do something. And so that's when I started working on the podcast and my mom was helping me with it.
Yeah.
And it was like our bright light. Like, let's talk about storytelling. Let's talk about something that's going to be a beacon of hope for the future. Even though at the time I was still weighing, it was all weighing on me because I had looked at my mother's paperwork. She didn't really want to look. She didn't want to know the stage, and neither did my dad. And I'm like the lawyer. I'm like, no, I need to look at it. So I knew what the diagnosis was. And so I'm kind of moving through the world and with my family knowing that we probably don't have that much time. And so how can we make the most of it? And so we did a lot of storytelling. I had my mom tell me lots of stories. She didn't want to do too much of it because she was like, stop acting like I'm dying. But I'm like, girl, but you kind of are. But I don't want to tell you, but because she's so, but it was a beautiful year of storytelling and us just spending time. And the subsequent loss there's so many iterations of it, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah.
And it's the hardest thing, but it's also a part of life and it makes me more human. And I feel like it's changed my perspective and it's made me a better person.
Oh, I'm so sorry. As an only child who also loves her parents so much, it's always your biggest fear, You obviously know it's going to happen at some point. My heart is with you.
Thank you.
I also love the story that you put out the podcast on your mom's birthday. I almost feel like you were co-creating it with her because you did start making it with her. And then there was a final push from her. So tell me about releasing No Straight Path. I know you did a little teaser and then something kind of magical happened after that.
Yeah, definitely my mom, Divine. So I put out the teaser on her birthday a year after her passing. And then 3 weeks later, HubSpot reached out to me to join their Creator Accelerator program. I definitely had to Google Creator and Accelerator because I didn't exactly know what that meant. But I knew it was an exciting opportunity. And I thought, oh my gosh, my mom's in this. She would tell me to do this. She'd be so excited. And so I ultimately decided to sign on with the network and chase my podcast dreams, which was so unexpected, but I felt her cheering me on and it was really wonderful. And I know I didn't answer your last question. I just realized about advice for folks dealing with grief. My advice is just feel the feelings, know that you're human, and take whatever time you need. You're never going to be fully over it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is okay. Don't try to continue to try to fix yourself. There's this Cheryl Schrade. She has a novel, Tiny Beautiful Things.
Oh, yeah.
It's a really good book, but she has this beautiful essay, and she says, it'll never be okay that your mother is not here, and that is okay. And it just gave me the most comfort in the world.
Yeah, I don't think you can optimize grief. If you love someone deeply your whole life, you will love someone deeply your whole life, whether they're here or not.
Exactly.
Tell me what it's been like, because you mentioned your mother was a storyteller. What has it been like continuing this lineage of storytelling through your podcast? What have you found out about yourself?
I found out that it's the thing that makes me come alive. Partly to answer your question, though, with that initial deep grief that I was experiencing, I felt like the podcast helped heal that. It helped me come alive and get back to my normal self, because my normal self is just really bubbly and excited about life. And a lot of people would say that I was still the same, but I think people super close to me could see like there was certainly a change. And so I felt like just being able to connect with people on a deep level, understand who they are, and just tell our stories and be in that space really helped me come alive. It helped me figure out my passion and helped me figure out what I love doing. If I didn't, if money wasn't tied to anything, what I would just continue to do. And when, time passes and you don't even think about it. And so I think the storytelling comes from my mother, but also my grandmother. So another wrinkle in the story is my grandmother also passed away a year later. And so my
Oh.
grandmother, she raised me too. So I lived with my grandmother, my mom, and my dad. So in the 2 years, I felt like I had lost like 50%, half of my immediate family. And so my grandmother was this beautiful storyteller, and she was like the letter writer. And then my mother was this inspiring, encouraging storyteller. She was more of like a preacher. She had
Mm.
a women's fellowship and she would pour into women and support them. So I feel like I can like live through both of them through the podcast. And that feels so incredible.
And I'm so sorry about your grandma.
Thank you. She's 95. She lived a beautiful life.
Yes, but it's still hard, you know? It doesn't matter how old they are. It's still, especially when you grow up that close with your grandma. My grandma also helped raise me. They're like part of your everyday. They're just like a second parent or third. So, okay, this is something that's really interesting to me. You were working your law job at the time. You had your podcast. You had just gotten signed through HubSpot. And I think you were also planning your wedding, right?
I was,
And you were
yes.
feeling extraordinary burnout, and you successfully negotiated a sabbatical. I find this fascinating because so many people listening right now, if they're not working a law job, they have like a 9 to 5 job, they're working in corporate. And I think that this could be a really valuable story for any of them. So I'm curious, how did you go about doing this? Because I know it was also right after you got a promotion, right?
Yes. So it wasn't necessarily a promotion, but I had just gotten, or I was just asked to run a case,
Okay.
which was a big deal because you usually just don't run a case at my level. But I'd been on the case for about 2 years and the team trusted me and they were very overwhelmed. And so they were basically counting on me to take over this case. And then all of those things were happening. And at the time when I was in the HubSpot Creators Program, it's a little different now. I'm just in the network, but I was trying to hit certain milestones. So it was a job too, because they were paying me and I needed to get certain downloads and things of that nature and do speaking events. And it was just a big commitment. I had to figure out, okay, what can I do to move forward because I'm overwhelmed and burned out? And I tried going back to HubSpot. I tried getting some wiggle room with some of the milestones, getting some more time. But even with that, it wasn't going to be enough. And so I thought, okay, wait, I'm going at it from one angle. Why not go from the angle of my actual legal practice that I have experience in and I've done it for so long that like I know I can come back to this. Because it's it's the thing that gives you security. So I'm thinking, okay, let me, do something with this podcast and get some more flexibility there, but I couldn't. And so I thought, okay, can I get flexibility with my job? A sabbatical. Some people I saw, I guess, during the pandemic, they were giving out more sabbaticals to folks to essentially, help with the financial issues that might arise. And so people could go off and do pro bono projects, I had a friend go off and work for a campaign. And so I know a podcast was a little different, but I didn't think it was that different. And so essentially I went around to different people and talked to them about my idea about taking the sabbatical. What did they think? What did I need to think about? Kind of like mentors people in power. And when I presented it to the higher up folks, I had already had answers to all their questions, and I even had people to fill my cases. So I talked to friends saying, hey, can you get on this case? Can I recommend you for this? So I had basically, instead of advocating for my client, I was advocating for myself. And it felt really, really good. And so I kind of knew they weren't going to say no. I was hoping. And after being there for a while and doing well, I knew that I was an asset to the firm and I wasn't asking for a paid sabbatical. I think that is different. Also, when you think about like the cost to the firm, what is it really costing them to keep me on, to keeping that position open for me? And so that's how I presented it. And they were At first, they were confused, but then they were ultimately supportive.
So how long did you ask for?
A year.
Did you go back or did you not?
Yeah, so this is where the transition happens.
Tell me.
Yeah, so during that time, speaking of, storytelling, writing letters to myself, so I wrote another letter to myself. And in 2019, I wrote, I like this law thing. I like legal practice. These are the parts I like. These are the parts I don't like. A lot of it was the litigation, the adversarial nature. But there's something missing. And I said, it's human connection. I need to figure out a way to get more human connection in my life. I don't know if there's a job that does this. I don't know if I need more time. I know it might sound idealistic. Maybe I can do both. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm writing it down and articulating I need to be doing something that's more people focused and helping people while also living a certain life. I said it all in my 2019. I knew that I had to go back to that. It was already brewing and kind of stirring up. And I'd done everything that I could to be happy in my legal practice. I saw that litigation was going to be tough. I cried when opposing counsel was yelling at me. It was just not good for my little soul.
Yeah.
I knew that. So then I got more white collar investigations work, which I explained earlier. I liked that work. And then when I mostly got that work, and I was even working on a reduced schedule, which was a way better work-life balance, and I still felt like something was missing. I knew I had to do some soul searching during the sabbatical to figure out what was next.
Yeah.
And one thing that really lit me up that my husband noticed was DEI work, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and mentoring. He said, have you ever thought about DEI? And I was like, no, naturally, you just do it. I was like, a Black woman in law. And he's like, I don't do it. And he's a Black man in law. And so most major law firms have that, and they've had it for quite some time. So I did a lot of recruiting. I would talk to different associates and incoming associates of color and kind of help support them and answer their questions. I would look at well-being in the big law context. I was on all these committees. I was really thinking about how do we support our humanity in the workplace. I was passionate about it. I was reading, Harvard Business Review every day on organizational psychology. I was excited. And my husband noticed that and he said, there are staff positions at these law firms. You should really think about it. And I initially brushed him off and said, no, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, But ultimately, that's what I transitioned to after a year. The firm was supportive. I explained that. And when I told all my colleagues and my mentors, they were saying, we'd hate to lose you, but we actually get it. We see this as more of you. And even in law school, you can kind of, they say, your career makes sense backwards. You can connect the dots. And the things I loved in law school is I was a legal writing advisor. Did I love legal writing? No. I loved advising.
Yes.
I loved mentoring students. I was a part of the Black Law Students Association. I was head of the community service work. I loved the housing clinic work that I talked about. Those were all people focused and not necessarily legal focused in the way that I could compare and juxtapose to my husband's journey, where he was state debate champion of his high school. And
he loves the debate.
He loves the art of debate. He loves the art of the intellectual issues. He brings up, he's like, what do you think about the Fourth Amendment? Let's talk about, I said, what? I said, I don't want to talk about the Fourth Amendment on our vacation, sir.
What do you think about the Fourth Amendment?
Who are you?
Thank you so much for asking. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So what does that kind of work look like day to day? And are you doing it for yourself or are you doing it at a firm?
Yeah, so I'm at a firm and I am basically just helping with communication strategy, which is really fun. Even in my interviews, they asked to see my podcast newsletter. They were really supportive. I have a great boss who really likes the fact that I even have a podcast, which is nice. And we do a lot of storytelling. So I was working on the National Asian American Bar Association, working and helping on their podcast and featuring the story of Asian female leaders. And so it's just been so much more aligned. You get to mentor different associates and lots of different things that are unique, though, to the law experience that I have insight into because I was an associate And so my team is all former lawyers and who have like more of a passion for people. And so we're also quite similar. And so it's been really great so far.
Wow. That sounds awesome. So, I mean, you're almost like a very high level coach and ambassador, it seems like.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to describe it. And we even have a coach on my team, a trained coach. And then I'm going to be going through a coaching program at some point, which is exciting.
Wow. That is so cool. And I love that you found a way to incorporate the podcast and storytelling into something that is slightly more traditional, but you're still finding a creative approach to it.
Yeah, no, it really was aligned. And it's something I did not plan at all. What was important to me is that my next job and career, they needed to support my
Mhm.
storytelling or at least not hate it. Because, some employers are like, oh, you have a side hustle, you have this. And so, just like even the initial support, the fact that they like that you can do something outside of work that's interesting and creative and that's, people think it's cool and great and not a bad thing, I think was always what I wanted. So the fact that I had that, but then even the skill set, like it was just some of the terminology that I didn't learn as a lawyer, but I learned as a podcaster when it comes to just marketing. Like I work a lot with our marketing team. And so I have a new language and a skill set from the year of building my business on sabbatical for the podcast that it's actually applicable to the work that I'm doing too. So it's just another, like, I'm like, oh, another divine thing that worked out.
Why do you think, just to circle back to your comment about the employers not liking when someone has a side hustle, why do you think that is such a issue for certain places?
I think more traditional places, perhaps more traditional industries, just want you to focus on the job. They're worried because intuitively you're thinking, okay, if this person has this side hustle thing, then they're not going to be as committed to the work. Studies and research show that it's the opposite. If you actually have something you're passionate about outside of work, and also even if you have a family, like it's kind of the same thing. People don't say, but if you have a family outside of work, if you're
Yeah.
like living for something else, then you can have a more full life and fulfilling life and then bring that to the job. And so then you're less drained, actually. For me, I always say this, I don't have any desire to be a full time entrepreneur podcaster. I really want to be a multi hyphenate. I want to do well in my corporate job. I want to continue to have my creative passions. I want to help, raise my family as I'm becoming a mom. That is what I want. Because also I went to law school because I'm risk averse and I want some financial security. That's what I've always wanted. And I just needed to find like the right space. And I think more corporations are being open to it because it's a new era and a lot of folks have side hustles, but
Hmm.
it's definitely something that's been changing post pandemic. I think there's more of an acceptance of it. But previously, I think, some people would just say nothing. I have a lot of podcaster friends who would just hide their podcast.
I think about that though, even if you're posting about it, if you've got that feeling of, oh my God, I hope nobody sees this so I don't get in trouble, then probably nobody's going to see it because that's the energy that's going into your podcast when it goes out into the world. So it's like, I think it's going to be much harder to be seen. So anyway, I'm glad that that's ending, but I think there's still such a weirdness about it. I'm like, you couldn't really legally say to somebody at this point in time, I don't think at least, oh, don't have kids because you're going to be distracted from work. But like, why is it okay to say to someone, oh, don't have a side hustle because you'll be distracted from work? Like, what people do after 5 p.m. is none of your business.
Exactly. Great analogy.
Yeah. But anyway, okay, I love this idea, time affluence. You talk about that and why it's been a solve for healing from burnout, anxiety, and depression. What is time affluence and why has it been helpful to you?
Yeah, so I think it was a term that was coined by Tim Kastner 2009 or so, but I was reading about a study about time and how much time we have and how that affects your well-being. I think it was
Mm.
actually when I was doing the research for one of my DEI well-being projects for my firm. And you started to see that people that had at least more than 2 hours of time to themselves, time to do whatever they wanted in a day, they had a higher rate of just joy and happiness throughout the day. If they had less than 2 hours, then that's usually referred to as time poor, time poverty. And that's where you're seeing like more mental health issues, well-being issues. But there is a cap. If you have too much time on your hands, they said over 5 years. Yeah, I believe the study was with Cassie Mulginer from UCLA, but it's over 5 hours of time, just like waste time that just to spend, then you also can have some, declining mental health. So there's certainly a balance, but you want to have enough time in the day to do what you want to do. You only live one life. And so being able to do that, I think, is extremely important. I was very fortunate during the sabbatical, even though I was doing the podcast, I was starting the business. As you probably know, that's a lot.
Yeah.
It's not an easy feat, and I could work 10 hours a day, and I almost did. But I had to pull myself back and realize, okay, I've got to set boundaries because it's all me right now. And giving myself enough time each day led to so much more joy and happiness. And so that's what time affluence is. And whether it be reading a book, doing your workouts, whatever it might be, it's so important to try to give yourself that time, but it's also a privilege. I'll be honest with you now. I have to be really intentional now that I have a podcast and a full-time job and I'm growing a tiny human and I'm married, even though my husband requires like nothing. He's so great. It's like doesn't ask me to do anything. It's like, please keep this up. But it is being intentional about still carving out that time. So what that might mean is you're going to have to say no to things to give yourself that time. Because if your day is just booked back to back to back to back, especially with things that feel like more like obligations and not things you really want to do, it's going to be draining. You want to make sure you can do things that actually energize you, that you have some free time, and that's not even related to your passion, right? Like podcasting is amazing and I love doing it, but if you're doing it 24/7, you want to make sure you have time to just read a book that's not tied to anything capitalistic. Nothing tied to a business, nothing that's tied to you having to provide for yourself. I think that's really what we're talking about, like the free time. And that's important. And so being intentional of trying to make sure that I continue to live a time affluent life is important, but it isn't always attainable or easy to do.
Because you mentioned your little one on the way, how are you thinking about that as you enter motherhood? Because that's something I think about a lot. Like I do all these different things and I love it. But I know before I have a baby, I have to pare back because I don't want my life to just be working all the time. Like I want to have a life and like be with my future child and take care of it. And so how are you thinking about it? And what are your hopes for this next era of your life?
Yeah, I love that question. I am realizing that I just can't do as much as I've always been able to do, and that is okay. It's a season in my life, and I just think when you have younger ones, when you just, talking to friends, doing the research, the first 5 years of these kids' lives, apparently they really need you.
Rumor has it.
Rumor has it in ways that, they don't need you as much, or they're a little bit more self-sufficient. And a lot of moms will tell you this too. They had to not maybe step back in their career, but perhaps maybe not go for that promotion, maybe just stay where they were at, and then their kids got older, then they went for the promotion or they did whatever they needed to do. And so I'm okay with that. I am like so excited to be a mom. I've always wanted to be a mom. I know my mom is watching me be a mom. So all of this is just like such a beautiful time. And I've really learned to be present. I think that's something else I learned from loss and grief. And so I really want to be present in this moment with my child. And so that means something will have to go. And so even right now with pregnancy, like it can be kind of exhausting. And so I had this plan to batch all these episodes and do all of this so that there would be, a small break. And I couldn't do it. I'm putting out a finale. I'm telling everyone early maternity leave. I'm so sorry. I love you all. I'll be on TikTok, perhaps. I haven't even started TikTok, but that's like seems like I can still connect with my audience. And, but I think that like you have to just say no to certain things at certain seasons, but know that it's just temporary.
Yeah, that's so good. There is something I've been playing with lately where it's like, I can't do that. And that's it. Like, I just can't do it. And I used to just like, if I couldn't do something, I would just beat myself up relentlessly over it. It's like, oh God, you didn't get to that thing. How could you not get to that thing? What's wrong with you? And now I'm just kind of like, you didn't get to the thing. That's just what it is.
Yeah.
Do you just have peace around it, acceptance? How are you approaching it?
Yeah, I think it's what is going to make me feel peace, inner peace. What is going to make me feel fulfilled, and be happy. Like sometimes I know if I push myself to go to a certain event, it's going to be so fun. And it's going to be time with my girlfriends. Like we do this monthly, like Wednesday wine thing. And sometimes I'm tired. But every time I go, if I still just push myself, it's just re energizing. There's other things where I'm like, oh, I like that. But like, let's do a cost benefit analysis right now. What is the ROI on this? Like, if I'm investing this much time, is the return really going to be, what I want it to be? And I think it's really knowing yourself, right? Like that's something else that's so important to me is this level of self-awareness. And that's something I've really worked on through the podcast. I feel like the most successful people, the people who are most fulfilled on my podcast, they all know exactly who they are. And they know what lights them up, what doesn't, what drains them. And so then they move through life accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's been really helpful for me. And so I try to preserve time for the things that really energize me and light me up and warm my soul. And I try to minimize the draining things. And the things that are in the middle, I say, oh, I'm so sorry. I can't do it right now. And that's kind of what you have to do. And you have to give yourself grace because we're all humans. And I think, and we're similar, you're an overachiever. So it's a journey. It is a journey.
Oh, I'm on the road. I'm on the road. So my final question for you, Ashley, through the show, I thought at first I was just like, I'm going to give people tools to be creative and then they'll go off and be creative. And what I've learned is kind of similar to what we're talking about. I really think the key to unleashing creatively is more of an inside job. So I think it's really hard to be creatively free if we don't trust, love, and know ourselves. And so I'm curious where you're at on your journey with each of those: self-love, self-trust, and self-knowledge.
I feel like I've gotten over the hump for all three of them. And I feel so grateful to be in a position where I love myself, I trust myself, and I know exactly who I am before entering motherhood, because apparently I'm about to lose who I am. It's like, oh, great, did all this work, and now I'm supposed to lose myself to motherhood based on all the TikToks. But but no, and it really has been a journey, and the journey that we really discussed. And it started with the bar failure. That was like the first big thing. And that really helped with the self-love, figuring out, okay, who am I outside of my achievements? And figuring out that who I am is not my achievements and it's not my failures, but it's how I actually deal with those failures and those achievements. And it's that inner stuff. It's that resilience. It's that kindness. It's that gregarious nature. It's whatever God has put in me to make me who I am. That is worthy of love. Ultimately, it's my humanity. And then for the self-trust, that was taking the leap. Everything that was inside me when I was writing that letter, and I guess starting back in the day, the first letter, but the 2019 letter saying, hey, something's off here. And, pushing myself to do the podcast, pushing myself to do the sabbatical, pushing myself to take the career transition, being brave enough to step into all the things that the little voice inside of me was saying I needed to do. And doing that even relationships before I met my husband, saying, oh, I don't know if this is the right person. I know I'm this age, and apparently they said I should have already met my person, but this doesn't seem right, so I need to leave it. That self-trust muscle led to a happy marriage, to a fulfilling career, to being in a place where I'm living in my dreams. And the third part, you said knowledge, right? Self-knowledge. And I think that's the connection, right? It was going through the journey of the self-love journey and the self-trust journey. You learn who you are, right? And you learn all these little lessons about how capable you are, about what drains you, what lights you up, what your purpose is. And I'll bring it back to my mom because that's exactly how she was. And so I just know that she would be, and always was, extremely proud of the woman that I am today, extremely proud of the mother that I am about to become. And I always admired her ability to know exactly who she was. And now I can say I'm that girl.
Oh, well, I'm so honored to have gotten to know her through you. And thank you so much for sharing your story, because I really do think one of the most important things we can learn is who we are is the best thing about us. And your journey illuminates that beautifully. So thank you, Ashley. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Sincerely appreciate it.
Thank you for listening, and thanks to my guest, Ashley Menzies Babatunde. For more info on Ashley, follow her at Miss_Menzies, MENZIES, and her podcast at no_straight_path, which you can also find at ashleymenzies.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to Rachel Fulton for helping edit and associate produce this episode. Follow her at Rachel M. Fulton. Thanks to Liz Full for the show's theme music. Follow her at Liz Full. And again, thank you. If you like what you heard today, remember to rate, review, and follow the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Share the show with a friend and post about it on social media. Tag me at Lauren LaGrasso and at Unleash Your Inner Creative, and I will repost to share my gratitude. Also be sure to tag the guests at Ms_Menzies so they can share as well. My wish for you this week is that you find the courage in your stories, resilience in your failures, and happiness in knowing who you are. Always remember that who you are is the best thing about you. I love you and I believe in you. Talk with you next week.